My house, 36 years of paint, mortgage, and marriage, wasn't mine anymore. A paper taped to my door said, "Notice to vacate." I stood there, barefoot, in a t-shirt that still smelled like my late wife's dryer sheets, reading words that turned everything I owned into someone else's property. 7 days earlier, my son's wife slid one sheet of paper across my kitchen table. "Just a HIPAA thing," she said, "so I can talk to your doctor if there's ever an emergency." I believed her. I always believed family first. I signed my name, Arthur Blake, without reading the fine print. A week later, that signature became the weapon that erased me from my own deed. The same hand that poured my coffee was now serving me eviction papers. My son called it estate planning. The court called it fraud. I called it the day trusts turned into paperwork. What followed was lawyers, forged seals, a notary's lie, and the slow death of what I thought family meant. But this isn't just about losing a house. It's about learning at 69 that love without caution is a signature waiting to be stolen. My name is Arthur Blake, and this is how my family sold my home while I was still living in it. The paper looked harmless. My son's wife slid it across my kitchen table like it was a placemat, something you set down without thinking. It was a single page, crisp and white, the kind of paper that still has the weight of the printer's warmth in it. She smiled the way people smile when they want you to feel at ease, when they want you to trust them enough to stop reading after the first line. "It just lets me pick up your prescriptions and talk to your cardiologist if there's ever an emergency," she said. "HIPAA this, HIPAA that. It's a hassle unless someone's authorized. I typed it up so you wouldn't have to mess with the forms." She tapped her pen against the signature line. My name, Arthur Blake, was there in a neat font. The date space was blank. The line for a witness in a notary seal waited like empty chairs at a meeting where I was the only person running late. I rubbed the pad of my thumb along the paper's edge. "You sure this is just for mids?" I asked. "Of course, Dad," she said, calling me Dad the way she sometimes did when she wanted something. "It's exactly what you keep saying you want. Fewer hoops. I'll handle the hoops." Her nails were a color that had no name in my father's world, something between plum and gasoline on water. She held the pen out. My son, Evan, stood by the window with his hands in his pockets, watching a couple of cardinals peck at the bird feeder. He was 32 and still moved like the boy who ran wind sprints around this very yard, turning tight corners by the maple tree I planted the year he was born. "Chelsea knows what she's doing. She did the same paperwork for her grandma, made things easier. This is just one less thing for you to worry about." I wanted to believe him. I always did. I had spent years wanting to believe the best about the people I loved, and it had mostly served me well. Mostly. I signed. That's the part people ask me about when they hear the story. They lean forward and lower their voices like the ending of a ghost tale still matters more than the beginning. What did it feel like to read those words? Did the world tilt? Did you rage? Did you collapse? The truth is smaller and meaner than any of that. The truth is you stand barefoot on your own porch in a threadbare t-shirt that still smells like your wife's dryer sheets 10 years after she's gone, and you read the words again because there's no way they can be right, and your mouth dries until your tongue sticks to your teeth. That's what it feels like. I'll tell you how it happened. People like to think these things crash down in a single minute, but every collapse is 1,000 hairline fractures you don't feel until the beam snaps. My name is Arthur Blake. I turned 69 last spring. I retired from the Postal Service 5 years ago, and I used to be able to tell you the exact number of steps it took to get from my porch to the curb. 12 down, 13 back up, because I counted everything in those days. I live, or lived, depending where you want to start the clock, on Sycamore Hills Court on the east side of Columbus, Ohio. Split-level house, brownish brick on the bottom, beige siding on top, a maple in the front yard with a scar on one side from the year the city kids tried to set off fireworks in the bark. My wife, Mary Ann, died in 2015. Ovarian cancer. We made that house ours with things you could see, paint colors, a new banister when the old one splintered, and things you couldn't see, like the way we filled silence with the sound of our forks against plates and the way she would sing under her breath when she folded laundry. The first fracture came the year after she died. Evan started dating Chelsea. She wasn't cruel. That's too blunt to be true. She was polite. She was clever at being polite. She brought a lemon bundt cake the first time she came over and insisted on washing the pan before she left. She asked about my mail route like it was the most fascinating thing she'd ever heard. She liked to use names the way salespeople do. "Arthur, was it Cedar Drive or the dog chased you?" she'd say. Then she'd laugh and tilt her head the way people do when they're trying to look less sharp than they are. She worked in real estate. Not as an agent, technically. "I'm a transaction coordinator," she told me. She said it with capital letters. She knew about escrow and title insurance and deed transfers. She knew all the words you don't learn in the ordinary course of living unless your living is making money off houses other people live in. She knew which banks moved faster and which companies could find workarounds. They got married in a winery out past Dublin. I wore a suit that was one size too big because I didn't trust the mirror in the tailor shop. We danced to a song Mary Ann loved, and for 3 minutes my son held me the way he used to hold my hand when we crossed Broad Street. He cried a little. I pretended not to notice. They lived in a rented townhouse about 8 miles from me, and for a while everything was fine. Saturdays, he'd stop over with a bag of laundry because the machines in their building were always broken, and he'd sit on the basement steps the way he did when he was 15 and talk about Ohio State football and the kids he coached in track at the high school where he worked. Those were good hours. Chelsea came too sometimes. She'd stand in my kitchen with her phone in one hand and a container of blueberries in the other and talk about the market like it was a weather system only she could predict. Then March came, the year before the paper. I woke up in the ER after a dizzy spell and a fall that left a bruise like a thumbprint on the back of my head. Not a stroke, not a heart attack, just dehydration, the doctor said. And your blood pressure's stubborn. We'll keep an eye on it. They gave me a red plastic bracelet that made my skin itch and watched me drink water like they were timing an event. The next morning, Chelsea arrived with coffee and soft white socks and a binder. It wasn't a big binder. 3 rings, white cover, with a sheet you could slide a title into. "Just in case," she said, laying it on my blanket like that made it softer. "Hospitals love paperwork. I did this for my grandma, and it saved us a world of trouble." The first page said, "Medical Information Authorization." The second said, "Durable Power of Attorney." The words sounded like big tools. Durable, power, attorney. They sounded like something you'd keep in the corner of the garage for the day the power goes out and you can't find the flashlight. "I don't need all this," I told her. "I'm going home this afternoon. They already said." "I know," she said, smiling. "This is for later. Arthur, just hear me. Imagine you're at Kroger and you faint, and they bring you here and you're not thinking straight. Someone has to be able to talk to a doctor. Someone has to be able to pick up your heart meds without the pharmacy giving them a lecture. You can revoke it any time. It just makes life easier. Evan had a paper cup in his hand. He squeezed the rim and left a tiny wet oval on his palm. He had always been like that, worrying at the edges of things. We just want to help, Dad. I nodded. It felt ungrateful to say no. Chelsea clicked the pen from the pocket of her cardigan. They'll send in a notary. It's a hospital. They have to have one. A woman with a lanyard and a small stamp came in. Her name tag said Jennifer, and her voice was the slow, bright tone people use on elevators when they're not sure anyone wants to talk. She checked my ID. She pointed to lines. I signed. I initialed. I didn't read the pages any more than you read the instructions on a fire extinguisher when the stove is already burning. They took off my bracelet at noon. I went home to a house that smelt like lemons and wood polish because Chelsea had run a cloth along the banister. She had put my mail in a neat stack, junk on the bottom, bills on top. 3 months passed. I watered the pots on the back deck every morning and made friends with a rabbit that discovered the clover by the fence. I went to the track meets. I clipped the coupons for dog food, even though I hadn't had a dog in 10 years. You do these things because there is comfort in patterns. You keep the radio on the station Marianne kept it on, even if the songs now sound like they were written by people who never had to repair a leaky sink.
One Tuesday in September, they stopped by in the evening. Evan had a restless look I recognized from when he was 15 and borrowed my truck for the first time. Chelsea put a plate of bakery cookies on the table, even though my cabinets were full of the oatmeal raisin ones I make every Sunday. Dad, Evan said, we were thinking it's time to refinance the house. My house? I asked stupidly. It was the only house we ever meant when we said house. Your interest rate is ridiculous, Chelsea said, sliding into the chair across from me and folding her hands like an earnest student. And your roof is near the end of its life. Prices are good right now. If we refi and pull some cash out, you could replace the roof and still lower your monthly payment. Also, this is important. You could put the house into a transfer on death deed. It avoids probate. Clean. Easy. It would protect Evan if anything happens years from now. She said the words so smoothly I almost didn't hear the thud of my own heart in my ears. I don't like debt, I said. My mother and I pay things down, not up. This is strategic, she said, smiling. Not debt for the sake of spending, debt for the sake of protection and upkeep. We can handle the paperwork, Evan added. We'll do the heavy lifting. You just sign. I pushed the plate of cookies into the middle of the table because it gave my hands something to do. Let me think, I said. Give me a day. Of course, Chelsea said, and she put her hand over mine for a second as if I had agreed. No rush. But the next morning, she called. If we want the good rate, we have to lock today, she said. Rates are in flux. I said I'd think about it.
And you did. You slept on it, she replied cheerfully. I booked a mobile notary for 5. She's sweet as can be. We'll handle the scan backs and wire instructions. At 5, a woman I'd never met sat at my kitchen table with a black briefcase and a stack of papers a half-inch thick. She introduced herself as Kendra. She had a little stamp with her name on it and a pen with weight in it, the kind you don't leave by accident. She checked my driver's license. She slid papers toward me like a magician dealing cards, each one landing in front of the place where my name waited. Chelsea stood at the counter with her phone open to a PDF that matched the paper in front of me. This is your existing loan payoff, she said. This is the new loan, she said, tapping. This one's just the right to pull your tax records. I read less than I should have. I read headings the way a man reads a map when he already thinks he knows where he's going. I signed. I initialed. Kendra stamped the pages with a quiet chunk. I kept expecting to see a line that said, "Sign here for the part where your house stops being your house." Funny how that line never announces itself. Evan carried the papers out to the car like they were carrying my wedding china. He hugged me in the doorway. "We'll drop these at Lakeside Title," he said. "Chelsea has a contact there." Thursday, I bought a pie at the grocery store and put it in the fridge for Sunday afternoon, thinking of how, when Evan was 9, he could not wait to stick his finger in the whipped cream. Saturday, my maple threw a shadow across the driveway the exact width of my old mailbag. You think of these dumb little things because you want to give yourself a day that feels ordinary. Monday morning, I went out to grab the newspaper at the end of the driveway. There was a white SUV idling slowly in front of the house like a shark. It paused, rolled forward, paused again in front of Daphne Nolan's place across the street. A woman in a blazer stared out the passenger window. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the house. She raised her phone, took a picture, and scribbled something on a clipboard. The SUV rolled on. I told myself it was nothing. Evaluators do that sometimes. Insurance companies send people around. My mind could write 10 harmless explanations for any terrible thing as long as it got to keep drinking its coffee in peace. At 11:15, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a dish towel because that's what you do. It was a man with a thick folder, his tie askew, carrying the particular smell of air conditioning in cars on the first warm day after a cool week. He wasn't a sheriff. I knew the look of those papers from years of delivering certified mail. He was a courier. The envelope was white. The return address a title company downtown.
"Mr. Blake?" he asked. "Yes. Package for you. Signature, please." I signed his little gray pad, the kind with the pen on a leash, and he handed me the envelope. It took me 30 seconds to open it because I wanted to open it slowly. I told myself if the paper slid out soft and harmless, I would feel foolish for letting my heart pound this way. It was a deed. It was my deed, and not my deed at the same time. "Quit claim deed," it said at the top. The words might as well have been chiseled. It named me as grantor, a word that sounds like an animal that pulls a sled. It named something called Cedar Park Holdings, LLC, as grantee. The legal description was long and beautiful in its precision. Lot 12 of Sycamore Hills subdivision as recorded, Plat Book 83, page 114, Franklin County Recorder's Office. And then the unfamiliar things, the parts that knocked my breath out. For consideration of $10 and other good and valuable consideration, the grantor does hereby remise, release, and forever quit claim to the grantee all right, title, and interest in and to the property. My signature was on the second page. I touched it with the tip of my finger, like touching it might wake me up. It wasn't my signature. It looked like my name, but it wasn't mine. There was a notary stamp, a circle with Kendra's name and commission number, and the little star that made the official look more official. The date was 7 days ago. There was another paper, this one a letter. "Welcome to your new home," it said, addressed to Cedar Park Holdings. "We are pleased to provide you the owner's policy of title insurance for the property at 1087 Sycamore Hills Court." It had the name of a closer at Lakeside Title. It had wire instructions. It had a line that said, somewhat cheerfully, "Keys to be delivered upon possession by October 1. I read it again. It still said the same thing. I called Evan first. He didn't answer. I called again, then again. On the fourth try, he picked up, breathless. "Dad, I'm in the locker room," he said. "We've got first period weight training in 5. "Is my house your house?" I asked. My voice sounded calm, like I was asking if the mail had arrived.
There was a silence on the line that told me he was either choosing between lies or trying to remember which one he had already told. Dad, it's a protection thing, long-term planning, an LLC. An LLC owns my house, I said, not me. It's still your house. We're just putting it in a safer structure. Safer for who? Dad, he started, and then his voice dropped. Chelsea is handling this. I'm talking to you, Evan. Chelsea said, I repeated. And then there were 100 other things I could have said. Where did you go? Who are you when I'm not looking? But none of them would have moved anything. I tell her to call me, I said, and I hung up. I paced the kitchen because my body didn't know what else to do. I put water in the kettle and forgot to light the stove. I noticed suddenly that the lemons in the bowl on the counter had started to spot. I hadn't seen that happen before. I took down Marianne's mug and then set it back because I didn't know if I wanted the comfort or the ache that came with it. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'll tell you because I promised the truth. I poured myself 2 fingers of the bourbon Evan bought me last Father's Day. I drank it. It burned less than I wanted it to. I took the deed and the letter and walked out to the maple tree and sat on the edge of the garden bed, my knees cracking the way they do now when I get down low. The grass needed trimming along the bricks. Small things shouted their smallness at me because they wanted to matter. They wanted to be the thing I fixed while I pretended not to notice the big thing breaking. The doorbell rang again at 1:42. I half expected it to be the banker with a giant check and a sheepish expression. It was a man in a navy polo with a lanyard, the kind that says official, in a way designed to keep people from asking too many questions. He handed me a paper with a carbon copy underneath. Notice to vacate, he said. 7 days. You can call the number at the bottom if you want to talk to the property manager. This is my house, I said. I don't know anything about that, sir. I'm just here to serve notice. I took the paper. He nodded once like we had performed a small ritual and went back to his car. There was a number at the bottom for Cedar Park Property Management. I called. A woman with a voice like unsweetened tea answered. Lease administration. You've made a mistake, I said. I'm the owner. She typed. I could hear the clack of keys and imagined a row of cubicles in a plant that was always almost dead. Our records show Cedar Park Holdings owns the property as of last week, she said. We're scheduled to replace locks and take possession next Tuesday. You're not, I said. I understand this is upsetting, she said, in the tone of someone made to say that often. If you believe fraud has occurred, you'll need to contact your attorney. I don't have an attorney. You should get one, she said, and then there was a pause that felt like sympathy almost making it through. There are things you do in a crisis that are just muscle memory. Mine is to put the kettle on. I lit the stove this time and watched the blue flame lift and curl under the metal. I called the Franklin County Recorder's office because the number is printed on every property tax bill I ever paid. A woman told me how to search by parcel number. I didn't know the parcel number, but it turns out you can search by owner name too. There it was, my property like any other item in a tall, indifferent database. Graceful legal language, clear lines of ownership. A new document recorded 7 days ago. Quit claim, it said again because the capital letters never stopped shouting. The PDF opened on my screen. The signature was mine if you didn't know me. If you knew me, it was a costume of my name. The notary stamp was Kendra's. I sat in the quiet afterward and realized the house sounded different already. It was like the echo changed. It's probably my imagination. Everything felt like imagination now, and imagination can be a cruel animal because it's just trying to protect you from sudden noise. I picked up the phone and called an attorney whose number was on a magnet Daphne gave me when her cousin ran for judge. Nora Whitaker. Elder law, the magnet said. I figured elder law was close enough to whatever this was. A receptionist with a patient voice listened while I stumbled through the facts. She didn't rush me. She said, "Can you come in at 4?" Nora's office was in a converted house on a quiet street near the university. The sign out front was hand-painted, and the door stuck a little on humid days. The waiting room had a low bookshelf with titles like Understanding Probate in Ohio and Your Rights as a Caregiver, and a small frame with a quote that said, "Trust, but verify." That last one made me want to laugh loud and inappropriately, but I didn't. Nora was in her 50s. With hair she wore like she didn't have time to keep it on one side of her face. She shook my hand like a person who had shaken a lot of hands that day already. She wore a green cardigan that didn't match her shirt and looked like she was always on her way to help someone carry groceries. "Tell me everything," she said, and I did. I told her about the binder in the hospital, the mobile notary, the deed in the mail, the notice to vacate. I handed her the papers like they were pieces of a puzzle she already knew how to solve. She read fast. I watched her eyes move, left to right, back to the top, down the page, a little squint when she found a thing she wanted to circle. She uncapped a pen and started drawing small constellations in the margins. "This is a durable power of attorney," she said, tapping the hospital document. "It's broad. It says your agent can handle real property transactions on your behalf." She said it was for medications, I told her, hearing the foolishness in my own voice. "She may have said that," Nora said, "but this document doesn't say that. There's no limitation language. It's general and durable, which means it stays effective even if you're incapacitated." I wasn't incapacitated. "I'm not saying you were," she replied calmly. "I'm saying your agent under this could, in theory, sign things for you." "She did," I said. Nora set the deed down carefully, like she was placing a glass on a wobbly table. "And this signature, does it look like yours?" "It looks like mine if you didn't know me," I said, "but no, not to me." "And the notary?" "It was Kendra," I said. "She was the mobile notary here. She stamped the refi papers. I don't remember her stamping this deed." "Because you didn't sign this deed," Nora said, and her voice was matter-of-fact, the way a mechanic might say, "This hose doesn't belong to this engine." "Mr. Blake, this has the smell of elder financial exploitation." "I'm not feeble. I'm not. I made all my payments. I mow my own lawn." Nora held up a hand to stop me from apologizing for something I hadn't done. She said, "Exploitation doesn't require feebleness. It often requires trust. That's all. Trust and access." "What do we do?" "We act quickly," she said, and she started a list that showed me she was a person who liked lists because they made the world look like it had edges. "We'll file an emergency injunction to prevent any change of possession and a lis pendens to cloud the title, make clear to any buyer or lender that there is a dispute. We'll notify Adult Protective Services because it triggers an investigation, and sometimes the DA pays attention sooner when that office is involved. We'll send a demand letter to Cedar Park Holdings and the title company, and we'll get the notary's commission records. If she notarized this without you present, that's a violation. If someone forged your signature, that's criminal." "There's a notice to vacate on my door." She nodded. "We'll attach the injunction to your door if we have to. If anyone shows up to change a lock, you call me and you call the police." I wanted to be brave. Instead, I said quietly, "My son." "I know," Nora said. She pushed a box of tissues an inch closer in case I needed one. "We'll deal with the law first. The heart will take longer." I signed a retainer agreement that cost almost everything in the account I never touched except for emergencies. It felt like an emergency. She put a copy of the papers on the copier and sent her paralegal to the recorder's office with a rush filing. She emailed someone at the title company with a subject line that said, in all caps, "Urgent injunction attached." She printed a sheet with the phone number for Adult Protective Services and pressed it into my hand. They'll ask your date of birth. That's normal. Answer their questions. Don't downplay. On the way home, I drove past the high school track because I wanted to see the oval of red rubber and make sure it still looped around the same way it always had. Evan was out there under the bleachers with the boy I recognized as his best hurdler. He had his hands on his hips, talking about stride length, I guessed, the way his shoulders kept moving. He looked up. He saw me. He didn't wave. I didn't stop. I didn't sleep much that night. The house was quieter than quiet, the kind of silence you get just before a storm when the air presses down. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and clicked through the county website again and again, like the page might change if I watched it closely enough. At 3 a.m, I watched the doorbell camera video from the week Kendra came. It saves clips to the cloud, all labeled with the same cheerfulness. Person detected. There she was in her navy blazer at 5:06, Chelsea behind her, Evan hovering. There I was, pulling out a chair, a seal, a stamp. But there was no clip of me signing the deed. That didn't mean much. The camera points at the porch. You can only see the kitchen because I left the door open. But I kept watching anyway, searching for something I couldn't have articulated if you'd asked me. A tell, a slip. An afternoon sunbeam that didn't belong to that day. In the morning, Nora called. The judge granted a temporary restraining order, she said. It prevents transfer of possession pending a full hearing. I'm emailing you a copy and printing one for you to tape inside your front window. I've notified Cedar Park. If anyone comes to your property, you show them the order and call the police if necessary. Thank you, I said, and the words felt too small for how big they were. By 11, a different kind of letter arrived. This one was polite in the way lawyers are taught to be polite in law school. Cedar Park Holdings denied any wrongdoing and stated that the deed was properly executed and recorded. They said they purchased the property in good faith and for value. They said they were disappointed by the allegations. They did a very nice job saying absolutely nothing. At 3 p.m., Adult Protective Services called. A woman named Brenda asked if I felt safe in my home. I thought of the maple tree and the scuff on the lower stair where Evan used to jump the last 2 steps. Yes, I said. Mostly. Do you have access to your money? I still have my bank account. Has anyone tried to isolate you from friends or family? I don't know how to answer that, I said, and my voice surprised me by wobbling. We can send someone to visit, she said. They'll talk to you. They'll talk to your son and his wife if you want them to. I don't know what I want, I told her, which was the truest thing I said that day. Chelsea texted me at 6. We need to talk, she wrote. Not, I'm sorry, not, I don't know how this happened, not, we made a mistake, we need to talk. The demand came first. For years, I had answered demands like they were my duty. I put the phone face down and set the kettle on again. At 8, there was a thump on my porch. I opened the door to find a box of my things. Not my things exactly, things that had somehow become theirs. Evan's 2nd grade clay turtle, a University of Cincinnati hoodie I hadn't worn since 2007, the onion-shaped Christmas ornament with glitter that never really came off even 20 years later. Things like that find their way into your children's houses, and you only notice they're there when someone puts them back on your porch, like trash day. I brought the box inside and sat on the floor next to it. It smelled like their dryer sheets. I found a note at the bottom in Chelsea's handwriting. We'll do what's necessary to protect our family. You should too. In the morning, Nora called again. We have the notary's log, she said. Kendra certified the deed. She says she saw you sign. I didn't. I believe you, Nora said, but right now, her stamp gives the appearance of legitimacy. We have to show the court why it isn't. She lied. We'll show that too, she said. Did you find anything on your doorbell camera? I found the day she came to the house. I didn't find the deed. Sometimes people are sloppy. Sometimes that's how people catch them. We subpoenaed the title company for their file. Emails, wiring instructions, notary verification. We'll see who else touched this. What about the LLC? We looked them up, she said. Cedar Park Holdings was formed 22 days ago. Registered agent is a cousin of Chelsea's. Their business address is a P.O. box in Westerville. They paid $1 for the quitclaim deed and plan to refinance the house at full market value, which is where their profit comes from. How? They transfer it to themselves for almost nothing. Then they borrow against the real value, often with a hard money lender. Sometimes they pull out cash, then default and let the property go to foreclosure, with the homeowner still sitting there wondering what happened. It's fast and ugly. It's designed for confusion. Will Evan go to jail? I asked before I even had time to stop myself.
I don't know who will be charged with what, Nora said. I know what we can do for you. We can slow this down. We can make it expensive for them to keep trying. We can make it public. That tends to change behavior. Public. The word sat in the room with me like a stranger. I imagined the way people would turn their heads at the grocery store if the story traveled where stories always do in a town this size, sliding along the aisles between the green beans and the paper towels. I tried not to think about it. My neighbor, Daphne, knocked on the back door around noon, the way good neighbors do. She came in already talking, as if keeping up a patter could soften whatever she was going to say. I saw a man with a measuring wheel out front, she said, in a reflective vest. He went up and down and wrote things down. Did you call for an appraisal? I did not, I said. This is crazy, she said, turning her palms up. You want me to be here if someone comes? I can sit with you. I brought banana bread. I'm useless in a fight, but I make very sturdy bread. Banana bread helps, I told her, and it did. We sat at my table and cut thick slices, and for a half hour, we were 2 people in the kitchen instead of 1 person in a war. That evening, Evan came alone. He let himself in with the code I hadn't thought to change because I still believed a 4-digit number on a keypad meant something sacred. He stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure if the floor was safe. Dad, he said. Son, I answered, because names matter when you are trying to remember who you are to each other. He looked thinner in the way stress makes you smaller and harder. His jaw moved like he was chewing on a tough idea. He said, Chelsea says you're overreacting. And when he saw my face, he lifted his hands as if to slow a train. I'm not saying that, he added quickly. I'm saying that's what she says. She says you signed. She says we're doing what smart people do. She says you don't understand how things work now.
She says, I repeated, and then I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not a mean laugh, not even bitter, just the sudden release of pressure when you realize a phrase has become a kind of poison. Evan winced like the sound hurt his teeth. She's better with these things, he said quietly. I teach kids who can't do a proper plank. She knows how to move money where it needs to go. I pointed to the maple. You remember planting that tree? Of course. Your mother and I bought this house because it had good schools and a garage big enough to fit the car and my workbench. We made dinners in a kitchen the size of your pantry now. We painted the bathroom the same color 3 times because we couldn't tell the difference until the light changed. Your feet used to stick to that floor because I bought the wrong kind of finish. We learned things by being here. It was ours. Not in the paper sense, though that matters, but in the way a place becomes a place. We're not taking memories, he said. You're taking the thing the memories live in. He rubbed his forehead. We need money, Dad, he said finally, small and fragile. Chelsea's got school loans. We're trying for a baby. The IVF is expensive. We're drowning. And there it was. Not justification exactly, not enough, but something that made the picture come into focus just enough to make me want to look away again. I could have asked. You could have asked, he said. We did ask. You said no to refinancing last year. Asking is not the same as doing it anyway when I said no. He flinched, then looked past me toward the stove, where the kettle was starting to hum. I'm sorry, he said. And it was true as far as it went. It was the kind of sorry people say when they are sorry you're mad. Get a lawyer, I told him. For yourself. Not her lawyer, not her cousin's lawyer, your own. He nodded. He looked like he might cry. He didn't. He went out the door without hugging me because hugging me would have hurt too much. 2 days later, the first hearing was scheduled. Courtrooms are less dramatic than TV. The light is wrong. It comes in the wrong windows at the wrong time and shows the dust on the backs of the chairs. There are two kinds of lawyers in the morning, ones who look like they slept in their cars and ones who look like they slept in their suits. Nora looked like she slept in her office, which I found comforting. Chelsea sat at the table across from us with a man whose tie cost more than my mower. He introduced himself as Keith Thompson. He smiled the smile of a person who knows how to win arguments where the facts aren't on his side. She wore a cream blazer and a blouse that tied at the neck, the kind you see in catalogs where the women walk across sunlit plazas with paper-wrapped bouquets. Evan sat beside her, not touching her, not touching me with his eyes. The judge was a man with kind eyes and a voice that could cut glass. He asked for the basics. Nora gave them. She laid the papers down like stepping stones. The power of attorney, the deed, the doorbell timestamps, the LLC registration records. She asked for the restraining order to be extended and for the title to be clouded until the court could determine the validity of the deed. She used words that had weight and edges. Fraud, exploitation, notary violation, unilateral transfer, lack of consideration. Keith stood like a man who has found a loophole before and plans to find one again. Your Honor, my clients deny any wrongdoing. Mr. Blake executed a valid power of attorney and subsequent deed. The property was transferred to a family-controlled LLC for estate planning purposes. There is no irreparable harm here. The harm is hypothetical. My house is not hypothetical, I said, louder than I meant to, and my voice startled me. The judge held up his hand and nodded at me like a school principal, calming the student who just discovered someone had written on his locker. Mr. Blake, he said gently, we'll keep this orderly. Nora slid a printout across the table. We would also like the court to consider this text, Your Honor, she said. It was a screenshot, enlarged, Chelsea's number at the top. A message. He's not reading these things, LOL. We'll record the quitclaim on Friday, pull a draw Monday, and be done by the time he even knows what happened. Chelsea's lawyer objected. Relevance, Your Honor, and we dispute the authenticity. Nora shrugged, like a person who plays a lot of cards. She said, phone records and discovery will clarify. But since opposing counsel argues no harm, the timing is relevant to the argument they were racing the clock. The judge put on glasses he had not needed until that exact second and read the printout. He took a longer breath than a man usually takes in a courtroom if everything is fine. He said, temporarily restraining order extended. no transfer of possession, no change in locks, no listing of the property for sale. We'll set this for an evidentiary hearing. Miss Whitaker, file your motion for expedited discovery. Miss Blake, Mr. Thompson, you will respond within 14 days. After the hearing, in the corridor where the air is always a little colder, Chelsea caught up to me. "This is ridiculous," she said, smiling in a way a person smiles when she knows she is on camera. "You should be thanking me. We cleaned up your title. We put your assets in a safer structure. You're making a spectacle out of this because you're bored." "I have a garden. I'm not bored," I said. "Then stop," she said, still smiling. The evidentiary hearing took 6 weeks to arrive and 10 minutes to shake something loose. Lakeside Title produced their file. Emails, a copy of the deed, a notary acknowledgement, a so-called gift letter purportedly signed by me stating that I was voluntarily transferring my interest to Cedar Park Holdings with no expectation of repayment. The letterhead looked homemade. The font was wrong for the office printer they used in those forms. It's funny the way your mind notices small ugliness when big ugliness is in the room. There was also a thing Nora loved, a certification from the notary that she had personally known the signer and verified identification. She had printed the whole line, not realizing that personally known and verified ID aren't supposed to coexist. You either personally know or you verify ID. You don't do both. Small, dumb mistake. Big consequence. Nora brought in handwriting expert to say that the loop in the B of Blake in the deed did not match the loop in the B of Blake in my known signatures over 30 years, and that the pressure on the cross of the T in Arthur increased where my hand decreases. "This signature is drawn," the expert said, and she didn't mean artistically. She meant traced, copied, a thing that follows a line rather than making one. Keith brought Kendra. She wore a black dress and would not look at me. She sat in the little chair they set out for witnesses and said that she was present for the signing and that everything was above board. Nora asked for her journal, the notary's log, where she's supposed to note the time and the ID checked. It had been filled out in 2 different inks. The judge noticed. Judges see everything when they want to. They scheduled a full trial. In the meantime, the order held. The locks stayed my locks. The kitchen drawers stayed where my hands expected them to stop. The maple dropped its leaves early that year, the sort of thing nobody notices but the person who rakes them. There was a Sunday in October when it rained all day in a clean, vertical way that reminded me of the day Marianne said yes to marrying me in a little church that smelled like lemon oil and mold. I made chili and watched a Browns game that I didn't care about because it felt like something normal to do. When the clock showed the 2-minute warning, I realized I'd been sitting with the attorney's letter in my lap for half an hour. It said, "We recommend you consider settlement. You could save time and money." It recommended a number far below the value of my home. It recommended peace.
I drove without thinking, turning left where I always turn left, ending up at the spot where Marianne and I used to park the car and walk down to the river on summer nights when the air still had the day's heat trapped in it. I sat in the car with the wipers squeaking and imagined what she would say. She'd say, "Arthur, what can you live with?" And I'd say, "I can live with being called stubborn. I can't live with being erased." When I got home, there was a message from Nora. "They've offered you $75,000, she said. "You can take it and walk away, or we can keep going."
My mortgage was paid, I said. How did I suddenly owe them my peace and my house, too? We keep going, she said. I just have to tell you, there are no guarantees. The trial itself is a blur whenever I try to play it back. People think trials carve themselves into your memory like a tattoo. They don't. They smudge and smear. You remember flashes, the way the court reporter's fingers move like a spider over the keys, the way the judge leans back when someone lies, the particular cough of the man 2 rows behind you. You remember your son looking at a spot on the floor like if he stared hard enough, he could fall through it. I remember the part when Nora stood at the big screen they wheeled in and played a video from my doorbell camera. It wasn't the day of the deed. It was the day before. Chelsea on my porch with her cousin, a man I recognized from a barbecue where you brought a pasta salad with too much pepper. She said, "No, not tomorrow. We'll just do it as POA. Easier. He doesn't read anything longer than a grocery list." Her voice was bright and ordinary. She might as well have been talking about lawn care. Keith objected. The judge overruled. He overruled a lot of things that day. I remember the part where I had to answer questions about why I signed a thing in a hospital I didn't read all the way. I said because my son was there and I trusted the woman who loves him. And it sounded exactly as naive as it was. I remember the part where Evan took the stand and looked like he had not slept in a month. Keith asked him if he had benefited financially from the transfer. He said, no, not yet, and 5 seconds later flinched like he had been slept because the words out loud sounded like the inside of himself. He was not a liar by nature. He was a liar by marriage and panic, the kind that makes you look like you were squinting at the sun even inside. I remember the part where Kendra took the stand again, this time with her notary commission on the line, and Nora pointed out that the notary stamp on the deed had an expiration date that matched the stamp she used 6 months earlier, not the new one she'd renewed 2 weeks before my signing. Not a killing blow, just one more small rock in the pile, becoming a hill, becoming a mountain. I remember the judge's ruling, not because it was poetic. Judges do not do poetry, but because it was neutral in a way that felt like a hand over my heart nonetheless. Mr. Blake's testimony is credible, he said. The evidence supports that the quitclaim deed was executed without his informed consent. The apparent signature is inconsistently replicated. The notarial acknowledgments are defective. The transfer to Cedar Park Holdings is void ab initio. Title is quieted in the name of Arthur Blake. The durable power of attorney is revoked. Miss Chelsea Blake's authorization to act on Mr. Blake's behalf is terminated. The court refers this matter to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office and the Secretary of State for investigation into notarial misconduct. Costs and attorney's fees are awarded to Mr. Blake. Void ab initio. It's a cold phrase, but it warmed me. It means from the beginning. It means it's like it never happened. I wish that's where the story ended. A gavel, a happy man walking into a bright morning, a closing credits song that sounds like a second chance. But endings are messy in real life. They're full of things like the way you walk out of the courthouse and your son stands by a column with his hands jammed in his pockets and his mouth ready to be brave and dumb at the same time. "We didn't mean to hurt you," he said. "I did," I told him, because both things can be true. "I don't know what to do," he said. "Start with the decent apology," I said. And then I heard myself and thought, there goes your father grading apologies like essays. He said, "I'm sorry." And it sounded like an opening to a longer sentence that he did not have the vocabulary to finish yet. I went home. I changed the code on the front door. I made a sandwich that tasted like something a person makes in an apartment the first night after the movers leave. Not because the house had moved, but because something fundamental had. I sat in the chair where I always sat to watch the 6 o'clock news and realized I had my elbows in a different place because the armrests didn't feel like mine, even though they were. It took a long time for that feeling to leave. The prosecutor's investigation moved like a freight train looks like it's moving when you are far away, slow until it's suddenly louder than anything. I learned words I had not intended to learn at this late age: tampering, forgery, elder exploitation. I learned you can be a notary for 10 years and make one decision that cuts that line in two. I learned that when a DA's office calls your house, it shows up on caller ID as private, and you still answer like it's a neighbor asking if you need anything from the store. Evan came over one afternoon 3 weeks after the judgment with a cardboard box that looked familiar because I had bought a dozen of them at Home Depot the year I cleaned out the garage. He set it on the kitchen table. "It has her things," he said. "I don't want her things," I said. "I don't either," he said. "She moved in with her cousin." "I am not the person you come to for advice right now," I told him. It felt cruel and honest and necessary in equal measure. He stood there for a second, shifting his weight like he needed to pee. Then he said, small, "You were a good dad." "I was an ordinary dad. That's different than good." "It was good for me," he said. And then he turned toward the door like a man leaving a crime scene where he had just realized he was the perpetrator. Nora sent me a bill. It was smaller than I feared and larger than people who haven't hired lawyers think these things cost. It didn't feel like a price tag on relief, exactly. It felt like a toll. People argue tolls. They still pay them. I spent the winter doing the dumbest good work I could find. I fixed the loose screws on the back gate. I replaced the felt pads on the chair legs. I alphabetized the spices Marianne used to laugh about when she remembered the year I tried to make cinnamon rolls while she was away visiting her sister. I let the sunlight find me at odd hours and felt something like gratitude about how it still did that. Then March came again, because time is rude and efficient. I woke up one morning and decided to sell my house myself. Not because I felt chased, not because I wanted the money, because I wanted to choose. There's a difference between being left and leaving. One is a wound. The other is a seam you stitch yourself. I called a real estate agent I trust, whose wife taught Evan in 4th grade. He came by with a scanner and a story about a seller who kept goats in the living room, and the story made me feel normal. He took pictures of the house where the maple threw a shadow across the driveway, the exact shape of hands I will always be able to place without looking. It sold quickly because houses like mine do when the roof is sound and the floors are honest and there's a maple willing to keep being a maple for another 30 years. I took the proceeds and bought a small condo in a building near the library where the elevator is slow but determined and everyone knows everyone else's names by the 5th Tuesday. It has a balcony just big enough for 2 chairs and a pot of basil, and from there I can see the bus turn at the corner and the skyline put on its evening self. On the last day in the house, I stood in the kitchen and drank coffee straight from the mug Marianne loved and said out loud into the empty room, "Thank you." Not to anyone, to the house, to the years we thought we could keep running forever, to the stairs that taught us how to walk them without thinking, to the pipe that rattled whenever you flushed at 3 a.m. like a polite ghost letting you know it was still there. I put the mug in the box with the bubble wrap. I closed the lid. I wrote in black marker, "Kitchen, fragile, meant to be." People ask what happened to Chelsea. They always do, the way people ask at the end of a movie if there's a one-line summary about the bad guy's life in white letters on a black screen. The DA charged her with forgery, tampering with records, and exploitation of an elderly person. The notary lost her commission. Cedar Park Holdings dissolved quickly like a sugar cube under hot water. Evan's divorce took 8 months and most of the money he was going to spend trying to have a child. Sometimes he calls me from a parking lot. Sometimes he doesn't call at all.
We are both learning a new language that has a dozen words for I'm sorry and none for what to do tomorrow. People ask how I feel about him. They ask with the particular lean people get when they want permission to forgive someone in their own life. I tell them the truth. I love him. I keep my door locked. Both things fit in the same house inside me. They aren't comfortable roommates. They aren't friends. But they seem to have decided neither is leaving. Last week, I sat on my little balcony and watched a boy in the building across the alley learn how to ride a bike without training wheels. His father jogged behind him, one hand hovering near the seat but not touching. The boy turned and looked back and shouted, "Don't let go." And the father said the best and worst thing a father can say at once. I already did. I think about that a lot. Letting go and letting loose are not the same thing. Letting go is a choice you make so another person can do the thing you cannot do for them. Letting loose is what happens to people when they are not held accountable at the right time. No one told me that distinction when I was 25 and thought I could repair a human with a lecture and a sandwich. I know it now.
If you're still listening, and I hope you are, because you might need this more than you know, here is what I learned the week my house disappeared and came back like a coin behind a child's ear. Read every page, even the ones with soft names like authorization and durable. Ask dumb questions and let them sound dumb out loud. Trust is not a plan. It is a feeling. Plans are written down and dated and double-checked. If someone tells you not to bother reading, that they've got it handled, make a pot of coffee and pull up a chair. If they love you, they'll wait the time it takes you to read. If your attorney has a cardigan that doesn't match, good. You want someone who puts their energy where it belongs. If your doorbell camera catches sunlight in a way that makes the day look like it might be saved, look closer. It might be a clue. It might be exactly what it looks like. Light, doing what light does. Keep banana bread in the freezer. Neighbors will show up with it, and you'll need to return the favor at some point when the world tilts their way instead of yours. If the law feels cold, and it will, warm your hands on the things the law protects but cannot provide. Dignity, choice, the quiet relief of a key turning in a lock you chose to change. If a person says, "We did what smart people do," and what they did was erase you, challenge their definition of smart. There's an intelligence that conquers. There is a better one that preserves. My condo is small. That is a blessing. Small places teach you to own only what you can carry in 2 trips from the car. They teach you to inventory what matters. This morning, I watered the basil and watched the city put on its daytime face, and then I made a list the way I used to make lists before everything blew sideways. It said, simple and stupid, milk, stamps, 2 good tomatoes, call the library about that book, walk around the block. The kind of list that keeps a man alive. There's an old man in my building named Harvey who tells me awful jokes while we wait for the mail. He told me last week that in his first marriage, he ruined a perfectly good Sunday by repainting a perfectly good room because he needed something to fix. Turns out nothing was broken that a sandwich wouldn't fix, he said. And I heard Marianne laugh in the back of my head like she was walking down the hallway with laundry in her arms. I don't think I'll ever put my name on a document without reading every word again. That's not paranoia. That's respect for myself and the hard work I did for 69 years to get here. I have a folder now that says Arthur's Decisions. That's what Nora called it when she sent over the revocation of the power of attorney and the instructions about what to do if anyone ever tries to present something similar again. It sits on my bookshelf between a copy of a book about birds Marianne and I used to point at when we sat on the back deck and a photo album with my son's face at 4 and 8 and 13 and 17. We were good there for a long time. Maybe we'll be good again in a different way. Sometimes I go back and park on Sycamore Hills Court and sit for 5 minutes, like a ghost who forgot his address. The new family has a trampoline in the backyard. The maple is larger and less fragile than the day we put it in. The porch has a new railing, which makes me happy and sad at the same time because someone cared enough to replace the thing I always meant to fix. The house doesn't miss me. Houses don't miss. They remember. That's what I tell myself. They hold the shape of you for a little while after you're gone, the way a mattress does. The shape relaxes. The house keeps being a house. If I were a different kind of man, the kind who believed in tidy lessons, I might end by telling you that family is everything. I won't. Family is not everything. It is an important thing. It can be the thing that saves you or the thing that makes you need saving. What matters is the part of yourself you keep intact while you're negotiating with both possibilities.
One more truth before I go make that sandwich I promised myself. It would be easy to tell you that I didn't sign because I am smarter than I was that day in the hospital or that evening at my kitchen table. I will sign other wrong things in my life. I will say yes when I should have said no. People will call me trusting like it is a flaw, and I will decide whether to keep it anyway. But this I know, I am not as easy to move as someone once thought. I am not furniture. I am not paperwork. I am not the thing you slide across a table and stamp. A week after I signed that paper, my house was gone. A year later, I left it on purpose. Between those 2 points, a man I recognize learned to stand up at his own kitchen table and say the one sentence everyone should practice saying out loud at least once. This is mine. I will decide what happens to it. I hope you never need that sentence. If you do, I hope you say it with your whole chest. I hope someone like Nora answers your call on the first ring. I hope the maple out front keeps throwing shade the way a good tree promises it will. I hope your son finds you in a parking lot one day with nothing to ask but the kind of apology that sounds like a beginning instead of an end. I hope you have basil on a balcony and a neighbor with banana bread and a door that opens when you've done the brave thing and when you've done the stupid thing too. I'm Arthur. I'm making a list for the grocery store because a man's got to eat even after the credits would have rolled. Milk, stamps, tomatoes so good they taste like July in a bowl. The world keeps asking me to sign things. I keep reading. I keep believing what I can afford to believe. I keep my keys on a hook by the door. I keep my door locked. I keep it open, too, when I choose. That's the trick. That's the whole trick, really.